All right, so if you guys look at lesson 1 monohybrid cross, hopefully someone has printed this for you. I'll also post it on the classroom just in case they didn't, so that you can have something to reference. So lesson 1 monohybrid cross, number 1. In one of his experiments, Mendel took a plant grown from heterozygous round P and crossed it with a plant grown from wrinkled Cs. Round is dominant to wrinkled. Show the genotypes of each parent and the gametes that they can produce. So A. Each parent 1, heterozygous, round P. Heterozygous means that it has one of each. So just as a key, it says round is dominant to wrinkled. So I would give capital R for the dominant round and then little r wrinkled. It says that parent 1 is heterozygous, so that's one of each. And it's crossed with a plant grown from wrinkled. The only way that it could appear wrinkled is if it's homozygous recessive. So we know that those are the two parents. And then the next one says, show the gametes they can produce. Well, this guy is either going to give a big R or a little r. This guy is going to give a little r either way. So that's your answer to A. B, show a Punnett square to show the possible genotypes of the offspring in the F1 generation. So what offspring can they produce? So for B, here's your Punnett square. Parent 1, doesn't matter what side you put them on. I just generally go down first and then across for the second parent. So first parent, those are the gametes they can produce. And along the top is the second parent. Now we're just going to fill it in. So we could have an offspring with big R, little r, going across and then down. Big R, little r, little r, little r, little r, little r. Okay? So sometimes I like to just highlight ones that are the same. So it's easier for me to look back on. You don't have to do this step. Doesn't really matter. Number 3, or C, show the phenotypes of the F1 generation. Well, here's the genotype ratios, and here's the phenotype. Genotype could be big R, little r. I see one of those. Well, I see 2 of those. And for little r, same thing. Phenotype ratios, big R, little r is going to look tall or round. And it's going to be the same numbers, 2 out of 4. The offspring, wrinkled, I see something there, 2 out of 4. So even though the numbers in this case turned out the same, 2 out of 4, 2 out of 4, don't always assume that. You have to list the genotype and phenotype ratios separately because sometimes they're not going to line up the way that they did there, okay? So that's your answer to number 1. Easy peasy, guys. I'm going to scroll down and we're going to do number 2. For Dalmatians, the spotted variety is dominant to non-spotted. So if you want to do S's, you can. S's are a little bit tricky. If you want to do it, make sure you use a big S for spotted, a little s for non-spotted. If you don't feel confident, some of you that have messy writing, you might want to choose a letter that's a little bit different. Use a Punnett square to show a cross between 2 heterozygous parents. So parent 1 crossed with parent 2, both heterozygous. Now, you don't have to show the gametes. We can just directly go into the Punnett square if you're comfortable with that. Parent 1 could give a big S or a little s. Parent 2, big S or a little s. Again, just making sure that you're dramatic. First square has a big S and a little s, or 2 big S's, sorry. Box number 2 has a big S and a little s, big S, little s, little s, little s. So genotype ratios, 1 out of the 4 will be big S, big S. 2 out of 4 will be little s, big S, little s. 1 out of 4 will be little s, okay? Phenotype ratios, this is where it gets a little bit different. 3 out of the 4 will be dominant because they have big S's, so that'll be spotted. So 3 out of 4 spotted, 1 out of 4 non-spotted. be careful for that. If you put 1 out of 4 and then 2 out of 4 spotted, make sure you add those together, okay? B, it says a spotted female Dalmatian mates with an unknown Dalmatian father. The female gives birth to 6 pups, 3 spotted, 3 non-spotted. What was the genotype and phenotype of the father? Now, this question, in my opinion, isn't the greatest, but it's kind of a super, super obvious answer if you think about it, which is why I don't think it's the best question, because you think that it would be a lot trickier than it should be. So just so you guys can kind of see, it says a spotted female. So we don't really know if even what she is, which is why I don't think it's a great question. But she mates with an unknown Dalmatian father. Well, the father, technically, based off the question, it should be unknown either, because it doesn't say if the dad is spotted or not, but he has to be spotted. Otherwise, they would say a non-spotted father. So basically what we're trying to figure out is what is the second allele for the father. I know that sounds kind of confusing, but basically this is the situation that the question is telling us that we have, okay? Just based off the question, we don't even have to do a Punnett square. It says that we have 3 spotted pups and 3 non-spotted. The only way that we can get non-spotted pups is if both the parents have a recessive allele. So both parents have to be heterozygous in this question to even possibly get any non-spotted pups. So the genotype and phenotype of the father is that he has to be heterozygous as his genotype and that he has to be spotted, okay? So not the best question. Next question, number 3, talks about eye color. And it says that brown eyes are dominant and blue eyes are recessive. So brown is dominant, blue is recessive. There's our little key. It says a blue-eyed mother has 2 blue-eyed children with a brown-eyed father. What was the likely genotype of the father? So the blue-eyed mother has to be homozygous recessive because she has blue eyes. And it says that she has a brown-eyed father. Oops, we don't want to assume that. We don't know what the second allele is for the father. It says that they have 2 blue-eyed children. Well, again, any possibility that they have a blue-eyed child means that the father had to have contributed a recessive allele, okay? So that's the answer. The father is recessive. The father is heterozygous, okay? So super, super easy. Explain why no brown-eyed children were born. Well, in this case, actually we can't answer that yet. That's something that we'll learn a little bit later. And then use a Punnett square to show all the possible outcomes of the above. Okay, so we could put this back into a Punnett square, and we could do our little Punnett square. Here's mom, here's dad. Possibilities was 50-50. It just so happened that we had 2 blue-eyed children, okay? Next question. Albinism is a recessive condition in which humans, no pigment being produced. An albino baby was born to 2 normal parents. So if albinism is recessive, that means big A is normal, and then little a, albinism, is recessive. Again, you could have chose any letters. It doesn't really matter if you chose an N for normal. That would have been totally fine as well. Indicate the genotypes of the parents. So an albino baby was born. So this was the baby. And both parents were normal, which means they had at least 1 dominant allele. Well, for them to have an albino baby, they had to have had that recessive allele. So we know that the genotypes of the parents were that they were heterozygous. Use a Punnett square to show the cross that produced this individual. Here's your Punnett square. Here's parent 1. Here's parent 2. Fill in the cross. Big A, big A. Big A, little a. Big A, little a. Little a, little a. So there was a 1 out of 4 chance that it would have been homozygous dominant, 1 out of 4 for homozygous recessive, 2 out of 4 for heterozygous. That's our genotype ratios. For our phenotype, this one and this one would have all been normal. So 3 out of 4 normal, 1 out of 4 albino. So there was a 25% chance that it would have been albino. Last one that I'm going to do for you guys, because I think this is pretty straightforward and you're going to do perfectly fine here. We'll do number 5. It says, for Mexican hairless dogs, the hairless condition is dominant to hairy. So hairless, dominant to hairy. Hairless, dominant to hairy. There's our nice little key, which we can use to answer our question. A litter of 8 pups is born, 6 are hairless, and 2 are hairy. Give the possible genotypes of the parents, okay? Now, one of the skills that you'll gain in this unit, just from practicing, is you'll start to see some patterns, and it'll give you some insight into what the parents would have been. So this is kind of what I mean for this question. A says give the possible genotypes of the pups. Well, the ones that are hairless would either be homozygous dominant or heterozygous. So remember that when we're talking about them being hairless, that's the phenotype. The genotype could have been either one of these. So that would be hairless. The ones that are hairy have to be HH. So that's A. That's all A is asking. B is a little bit more tricky. You have to kind of understand the pattern, and you can actually use the last question that we just did together, number 4, to understand that pattern. So we would call this, it's technically a 6:2 ratio, which we can simplify to a 3:1. If you remember the last question, that was a 3:1 ratio, and that's a pattern that's given to you by having 2 heterozygous parents being mated together. So just to show you, and that's just something by practicing and doing lots of, you'll understand this pattern. So if we give 2 heterozygous parents mating together, big H, little h, little h, little h. This Punnett square is a 3:2 because you have 3 dominant phenotypes to 1 hairless or recessive. So this is where you get your 3:1. So that's how we know that the parents are both heterozygous. Okay, just to show you another pattern that you might want to be familiar with, if we were to have, for example, big H to big H, little h, here's your Punnett square. You would see 100%. So all of them being dominant. If you were to have a Punnett square with big H, little h. Oh, that's the one we just did. Big H, little h. This would be 50-50. So if you see a 50-50, this one would be 100% as well. The last one, the one that would be 50-50, would be if you had this. There. This one's 50-50. So if you see big H, little h, here's your 50, there's your other 50. Okay, so just be aware of some of those patterns. Those questions are a little tricky to think of, but if you did a couple examples, you'd catch on really quickly. Please let me know if you have any other questions, if you have specific ones. So say number 10 doesn't make sense, just send me an email. I will make a quick video showing you how to do any questions that you aren't sure of, okay? Have a great day, guys.